In the Australian drawn-out battle, the blockade was finally getting loosened as Australian units pummeled through the Imperial blockade, shortening it and eventually overrunning the Imperial units. However, Australia wasn't done yet, as they quickly devised a plan to counterattack enemy units in America. America was now left alone, as multiple rebellions had taken place in the Emperor's galaxy, and Australian units swept through with little to no resistance. However, it wasn't all plain sailing, as more and more Imperial units jumped in to help their left-alone units. As Australia started to progress slower and slower, they were eventually cut into a stalemate, as their units at the beaches were surprise attacked and were thrown into a big stalemate. The UN was trying to calm down Australia, but eventually had to oblige to Australia's demands and started their own front, but yet again they were also thrown into a stalemate. In China, there was another attack on them. However, this time it was fierce, and the Chinese government was no match. The UN, in a bit of a panic, decided to call on any country that could support China, as China was quickly being blitzed through their own territory. China was desperately trying to protect Shanghai, which would eventually fall into enemy hands. Now, as more and more enemy units came in from Mongolia, UN units charged in at full speed to meet the Chinese invasion head-on, saving Shanghai, China's capital, from the imperial government, or imperial forces, and then they were locked in a stalemate with trenches lining up China. In Africa, where Canada and America were hiding, protected by the British, scouts from the imperial force saw something and decided to try fight off the Earth soldiers. However, they got completely pummeled by the much larger British brigade, and more enemy units came in a bit of a grasping situation. British units ordered America and Canada to retreat, as they would block off the enemy force and then follow suit. After the Imperial invasion was postponed, British units fled the scene to leave the African Republic to fight the third Imperial invasion alone. They thought they could do it, but the Emperor hadn't had a plan. They sent in special forces units and all-terrain units, and then started to surround the African Republic, as they knew that no one can survive a battle that big, and they were right. The Imperial forces surrounded African Republic units, and the UN and NATO came in with a bit of a chaotic operation and bursted through the enemy siege. African units ran at full speed out of the open block, and NATO and UN forces fled the scene as soon as possible. Back in America, there was now a breaking point, as Australian forces started using up all their resources. However, now their army was practically decimated, and they had to call on the British to help them. Australia doesn't really have the best attack force, and so many of them were replaced by British soldiers as they went to the very underdefended New Zealand beaches. They came through with ease, with the support from many countries, and the beaches were overrun. However, it didn't stop there, as most of the countries backing Australia kind of left as they noticed that it will be an easy win. However, the country that stayed behind was Britain. and eventually the southern island on New Zealand fell to Australian hands. British units re-fed and gave ammunition to Australia as the completely outnumbered Imperial Navy got swarmed, and Australian units fled the beaches. Time after time again, Australian units called for the Imperial units to surrender, but there was no oblige, as there were only 5 Imperial units that had ever surrendered in the war, and New Zealand was liberated. Australia kept their navy and air force there until New Zealand built up their army again. Thank you guys so much for watching episode 3 of If the Galactic Empire Attacked Earth. Really hope you enjoyed. This one did kind of flag around Australia a bit. Yeah, and share it to your friends who might like it, and bye.